So following on from my last video on Elder Scrolls Online, I've been playing a bit more of it this Christmas, and I've had the break. And I think I'm going to carry on playing it on a casual basis, of course, for a while yet, because it's now looking a lot better than at launch. So what I'm going to go through in this video are my top 5 reasons for returning to Elder Scrolls Online, which might well apply to other people who got it at the start really excited, but then turned away as I did, with all the many problems. So a few things that were always very good about it was still relevant today. It's got very beautiful artwork. Now this is of course very subjective. The art style is something that is different for different people, but for me it's perfect. This is exactly what I want of an MMO. Different MMOs have their own style. Some of them I like better than others. This is the one I like the best out of all of them. There's also really great atmospheric effects with thunder and rain, and you know, it's at night time the lighting effects are really good, and daytime as well. It just feels like a world to me. The accessible combat is really good feature of it. The social interactivity is far from intuitive, however, so it's not, I wouldn't necessarily say the game itself is accessible, but the combat certainly is. Nice varied questing, professions that are useful. This is always a big one for me. The fact that you can actually craft gear that is of use to you and you can keep doing this while you're leveling is a huge plus. And also lots of customization for your character, like far more than on any other MMO that I have played. There are other MMOs, and some of them, yes, may well have as much customization, but I have not personally played any for any length of time anyway that have as many as this. But those are the things that existed from the start. So what are the new things that have appeared in the game that make me think, yes, actually, do you know what? I'm going to carry on playing this for a bit. One of them would be the new business model. They changed from saying, no, we are going to be a subscription model and that's all there is to it, to similar to a free-to-play but with download content. And with that has come an online store called the Crown Store. Like with MMOs where this actually works, you still have the option of a subscription, which is what I go with. That's always the best option. With it comes a certain number of crowns that you can get and spend on the online store as well as the fact that with your subscription you get all the download content as well. And the good thing about the store is there is no element, as far as I can tell, of pay to win about it. What it does, which is what I think a good online store does, is massively expand the cosmetic options for you with new motifs, mounts, costumes, should you want them. There are some useful options, it has to be said. You've got experience scrolls and you've got a mobile banker and merchant, which you may well want and will probably set you back quite a few crowns if you want to use those things. But there's nothing that gives your character a boost in power, which is the key thing. So if you want any of the other things, even the things that could be considered useful, you don't actually need them. You can get away with that. Now, in fourth place for me is the fact that factions are no longer a barrier to PvE play. Now, this in theory should be a lot higher for me, but there's just so many other things that are so much better. What I dislike intensely about most MMOs is the faction thing getting in the way of my PvE play. There are very few MMOs I play for PvP. I like the PvE. And it is annoying to me that I am already restricted in my choice of, say, class, or maybe even further restricted if I have actual friends playing it, because we all have to agree to play on the same faction if we want to play together in PvE. And there's no need for it. The actual opposition, the factions, never make sense in the storyline of PvE. It's always a PvP thing. It's always an actual warfare thing. So when you've got a game that separates out PvE from PvP, it makes for a much better social experience. This was done in Lord of the Rings Online, but not very well. But in Elder Scrolls Online, now that they've removed the faction restrictions for PvE, this is now a game that does it well. Because it doesn't, it doesn't matter what faction or race you're playing, you can group together. You can be in the same guild, which I think was always the case before, but you couldn't group together in dungeons or group together to level or anything like that. The only thing you can't do is do PvP together, but that makes sense. Factions make sense with PvP. Now, in third place for me is the fact that the PvE content also scales. So you can do zones wherever you like, you can go to wherever you like, and you can do quests there, and it all scales to you. The rewards scale to you. You can do the anchor events in any zone. You hear that anchor sound go off. Doesn't matter what zone you're in. You go over to it, you will get experience commensurate with your level and a reward that is also suitable for your level as well. This solves many problems. One of the big problems with Elder Scrolls Online at the start was twofold in terms of the leveling content. First of all, it was all very linear. It was, this is the zone you're starting in. Then you go into this zone, then this zone, then this zone. And the only thing that determined that was your faction. It was so linear. The other thing is you had to basically do every quest in every zone, otherwise you could quickly fall behind in levels. In other words, there was only just enough leveling content to get you leveled. Now, that is no longer the case because you can level wherever you like. If you do a zone and move on to the next zone, even if you've left a load of quests behind there, you get to a certain point, that's fine. You just jump across to either one of the new zones that's been created since the game came out, or you'd go to another faction zone and start questing there. You can do it in whatever order you like. You can pick and choose. You can leave one zone and move on and go somewhere else in another faction or in your same faction or wherever. This means you've got a real element of exploration now, which was missing at the start of the game. In a role-playing game, you want that exploration. Exploration means choice. It means you're going to different areas. You're being led to different areas, and you just get to explore. In second place has to be the removal of veteran ranks. This follows directly on from the scaling idea. What happened originally is you had this very linear pathway, and you got to the end of it, you got to level cap. And then what the game did, because it basically didn't have any real content for you to do aside from PvP, so what they did is they came up with veteran ranks, and they would get you to do all the leveling again, but in a different faction zone, but still very linear, and get veterans rank. And that in itself would have been annoying enough because you're still following this linear treadmill. But it was worse because it was much tougher to do solo. Now, leveling should always be possible to do. I know it's an MMO, but it should also always be possible to do leveling content solo. And that became difficult at times. You could do it, you just had to, take much greater care. You can argue you had far more skill points, you had a greater range of abilities to cope with different situations. But it became tedious, and like every now and then you would come across a tough, like, boss type character that would be a real headache to do solo. And now that's been removed. Now that we can move from zone to, we don't have this linear pathway. Veterans ranks made no sense anymore. So they replaced them with a champion point system. Now, I've got no real firm ideas at the moment on whether I think they're good or not. The champion points certainly seem to allow for, again, a much greater degree of customization. So there's that, which is positive about it. Whether the champion point system or the champion level system is positive or not, I've yet to form an opinion on. But it is far and away better than veteran ranks because, as I say, the content is scaling to you. It's not suddenly becoming more difficult once you've hit level 50. Now, in number one position is a quality of life feature. And, when I was thinking about, how I'm going to order these things, I thought, this is a really nice feature, but should it really be the best? But every time I tried to compare it to someone else, I thought, even though philosophically I should think other things are better about this game, this is the one that gives me the most joy. And at the start of the game, like in a lot of MMOs, you're leveling, you're looting stuff, you're collecting a lot of junk, which means you have to keep going back to town to find a merchant to sell this junk. But what you really need to do, of course, is buy a load of bag space. And that's, of course, something you can do in the game. It encourages you to buy bag space. So you get extra slots in your inventory and in your bank and things like that, so you can store it. But in Elder Scrolls Online, a lot of the so-called junk that you get isn't really junk at all. It's crafting reagents. And being a crafter myself, I wanted to hold on to all of these. I didn't want to junk anything that could be used for crafting because I want to do all the professions. This put massive, massive strain on the inventory to the point where I would go out to quest with only like 20 slots available, which means you weren't going out for very long. When I came back to the game, and this is something you can only get with the subscription, but when I came back to the game and renewed the subscription, got a message as soon as I logged in. All your crafting reagents have been moved to this sort of crafting bag. Oh. So now what happens is whenever you loot any crafting reagents, it automatically goes into like a void area, which you can see and you can access. And it's not cluttering up your normal inventory. All of a sudden, you've got loads of inventory space. Loads of it. This is amazing. And it's not like having a reagent bank that you have in some games where you take all those crafting reagents, you put it into a bank. I'd be happy with that. Actually, I would be totally happy with that. This is even better. It automatically does it. It means something else as well, which actually is a bit of a double-edged sword. It also means that if you've got any sort of armor or weapons, anything that you can deconstruct for your professions, if it's in the bank, you can also have access to it from where you are now. So you could be deconstructing that. Now, it is a double-edged sword because it might mean you deconstruct things that you actually intended for another character because there's no indication whether the item is from your inventory or from your bank. So that's, maybe there's an add-on that tells you, I don't know. But that's something I would like to see in game. But the idea that, as I say, on one character you can just throw all your armor and weapons into the bank, and then let's say it's heavy armor, and on your blacksmithing type character, you can deconstruct it without having to go to the bank and pick it up. You can just deconstruct it from the bank. And all the materials you get from that are just going automatically into your crafting area, which is available to all your characters at once. This is spectacular. So not only does it free up all of your inventory and bank space from these crafting reagents, but also it means you can access them from all your characters because it's all in one central account-wide pot. And for me, it didn't matter what I tried to compare it to. This was just the best feature that just makes playing the game much more fun, because there is nothing less fun than going out and questing and having to stop because your bags are full. So those are my top 5 reasons for coming back. There are other changes as well, but either I haven't explored those other changes yet, or they're just not for me. What's bringing me back, but they may be for other people as well. But I actually could have added an extra one here, and that is that one of the big reasons for coming back are that even though there are still some things that I think could be improved on, what has happened in the couple of years that this game has been out, the game has changed almost. At its core, it's very much the same. It's got all those elements that were still there and made me really excited at the start. But it's seemingly the case that the developers have just got rid of all the crap that made it rubbish. It's like, instead of sticking to their guns and going, no, this was a really good feature, we just have to make it work, they've gone, it doesn't work, they've torn it down, and they've rebuilt it to the required standard. And the fact that the developers seemingly have the attitude that if something's not working, we're not sticking with it, we're going to change it, we're going to get rid of it and put something better in its place, because that's what they've done, that to me shows that this is a game that isn't going to have substandard features in it, that they are prepared to change whatever is necessary to deliver on a good game for their customers. And that was something that looked completely lacking at the start, because it really looked like we were being treated very badly as customers at the start, and the turnaround is amazing. It really is amazing. And for that reason, I would say that if anyone really likes the idea of the Elder Scrolls Online, and for gameplay reasons, if there were other reasons that stopped you playing it, because, I know there are some people who played the Elder Scrolls series and really wanted an Elder Scrolls 6, and that's not what this is. But if the reasons you stopped playing were like me, for gameplay reasons, then I would take another look at it, because it's really turned itself around. And yeah, I am going to be playing this at weekends at least on a casual basis, and I think for a good long time yet.